One reason the questions come up so much about real estate is some of the other investment types are just really easy. You're going to invest in a private debt fund, a private equity fund. It's pretty much set, forget it, you're done. There's more rules that come into place with real estate. So sold that property, made a really good profit. The funds can be sent back to that entity's bank account, back to the retirement account. No tax implication on the US side.
It's probably not wise just to have a real estate asset solely making up your retirement account.
I would say 90+% of the clients come to us, they already have their investment in mind, whether they just know generally what they want to invest in or they actually know exactly what they want to invest in.
Building a diversified alternative investment IRA. I think that's probably the goal for an investor. Welcome to Talking Expat Taxes. Today, we're going to be talking with Matt Calhoun. I've had a lot of conversations with clients recently looking for different ways to structure their retirement planning, whether it's with IRAs and 401ks, really just trying to diversify their assets and their retirement assets in general. And I'm really excited to have Matt on today. I've worked with him in the past with some different deals. And yeah, I'll let him introduce himself, but we're going to be talking about these different investment strategies. So Matt, appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate having me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So maybe if you could give a little background, just what you do in general, your background, and we can go from there.
Yeah. So currently I am the director of Equity Institutional, which is a self-directed IRA custodian for different assets. We've been around for about 50 years and helped just shy of 500,000 account holders diversify their retirement accounts through mostly alternatives. Some people still look into traditional assets, but most of our clients come to us to truly diversify, get into some alternative investments. I got into it really through real estate investing. I did financial advising before, so I've been in financial services for over 10 years. It's just a little hard to recommend some mutual funds and stocks when you know these alternatives out there. They're a little more exciting. Got me excited into this industry. I do some real estate investing on the side as well. And this is a way to merge it to a little bit of the financial services world with retirement funds, and then also getting into, like I said, what else is out there in the investment space. So that's how I got into it. And most of my day now is just talking to clients who want to know how to position those tax beneficial accounts they have, retirement accounts, and get them into some different types of asset classes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Maybe we could start by just defining broadly what you mean by alternative investments.
Yeah. So it's cool lingo we use for the industry. Mostly we define alternatives as not stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And then if we want to consider a little bit more, also assets that are allowable in retirement accounts. The only thing that's not really allowable in a retirement account is life insurance and collectibles. So the IRS says you can't invest in life insurance because it already has its own tax beneficial statuses. And then collectibles is a little bit of a gray area.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I haven't heard that. That's interesting.
The examples I always give is antiques, paintings. That's what would be considered collectibles, trading card collections, and so on.
I wonder if it false references, because when you have capital gains in general, there's long-term, short-term capital gains, but collectibles has its own tax rate of 28%. I don't see it a whole lot, but I wonder if it cross-references that same rule in the alternative, like in the retirement plan rule. Most likely. I doubt they have two different versions.
I think that's part of it. I've always been explained that it's a valuation issue as well. It's hard to put a value on priceless pieces of art, where most assets you can get at least a hard asset value or a marketplace value. It's a little bit harder in the collectible world. Right. I mean, that was a lot of it was written in the 70s. Now we have more of a marketplace for those things. So there's some justification and there's ways of structuring some investments that you can get some exposure into that world. But for the most part, you can invest in anything.
Putting a collectible into something that is a legitimate.
Or we've seen groups who will structure it. They'll create an entity and the entity goes and buys it. But technically the retirement accounts directly invest in the entity. So that's one way of still getting exposure to that asset class, but maybe structuring it in a way that keeps the federal government happy there as well, which is most fars is dotting I's, crossing T's to make sure the retirement account stays in good standing. You still get that tax benefit of those accounts while doing some of these investments that aren't as institutionalized as stocks, bonds, mutual funds.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess a typical person could be someone that has an existing IRA or 401k, and the typical IRA and 401k is invested in non-alternative investments. So stock
Yeah.
funds, mutual funds. So the idea is to put different types of assets in there. So it could be crypto or or in gold or real estate, like you mentioned. What's the most common thing you see? Probably real estate, I would imagine. Or
Yeah. Real estate and gold probably are the top two that come into mind. They've really grabbed on to the self-directed retirement accounts. So that's probably what we see the most of. My division, our specialty is basically private equity, private debt. And a lot of those still involve real estate and different things. But yeah, we just see people purchase real estate internationally, domestically. Gold is always, you'll see, use your retirement account to buy gold, like commercials on TV. That's what they're referring to. And then obviously, like you mentioned, crypto in the last few years has grown quite a bit for retirement accounts as well. So those are what we see most of.
So you can just buy directly. So for example, like with crypto, you hold a wallet of some kind and you get through as a retirement account. Is that how it generally works? Or do you have to structure a particular way? I'm sure there's a bunch of different ways to do it. But
so currently the industry is structuring it in ways where we try to keep a third party involved. And while we're doing that there is no guidance right now on crypto in retirement accounts. The government's still catching up on crypto in a lot of spaces, but they're really delayed on retirement accounts. We're trying to treat it basically.
So for now it's allowed, but I guess legally, is there any room or risk of doing it and the IRS or whoever coming in saying, we don't want this in retirement accounts anymore? I guess there's always a risk.
Yeah, there's a risk for any asset class. Technically, the rules that I'm talking about have been set in place since the 70s. So this is when IRAs were established. That's where self-directed retirement accounts. So there hasn't really much been changed there. We'll get some case law every once in a while that speaks to, hey, this is how you hold certain things. So we're treating it like precious metals. There's been a lot of case law on precious metals. And essentially how that's treated is you can't take personal possession. If you buy gold in your retirement account, you don't hold it in yourself. You don't hold it in your own safe. You have a third-party depository. So we've treated crypto similarly, where we're saying, hey, you should have a third-party wallet provider, a broker, someone involved that can do your storage so you're not self-storing. We would recommend someone not even think about like a safety deposit box or anything like that. Treat it basically the same way that we've treated gold previously. So in most cases, there is a third party involved that's going to do the storage piece for the IRAs.
So I think the only thing we know about crypto from the IRS, as far as its classification, is that it's not a currency. So you don't treat it like a currency, although that may seem a little bit illogical in some ways, depending on how you use it. But it's not a currency, it's an asset. So I agree with you. If you don't really know what exactly it is, I think the safest route would be to treat it like gold or something like that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yes. Most of the questions I get personally on this is real estate investment, just because I deal mostly with expats and people living outside the US. And I do a lot of, people investing in foreign real estate. And there's a particular niche or advantage potentially of doing that through an IRA. I guess I'd be interested to hear practically like how you take those steps to actually make that happen. Let's say you've identified a property in Panama or Costa Rica that you want to purchase and you have an IRA. So what would practically be the steps in doing that?
So one reason the questions come up so much about real estate is some of the other investment types are just really easy. You're going to invest in a private debt fund, a private equity fund. It's pretty much set, forget it, you're done. There's more rules that come into place with real estate, a few more moving pieces and just some things to keep in mind. I'll walk through the Panama if you're an expat investor who had an old 401k. Let's say you worked for a long time, contributed to this 401k plan. You've retired from that job, and now it's time to invest in buy hard asset in Panama with this retirement funds to continue to grow that or to start withdrawing. Somebody would then open up an IRA account with a company like ours. They can roll part of that 401k over, all of it, however much they need to. When we're buying properties in the domestic United States, they can either buy it directly from the retirement account, or they can set up like an entity to manage it or to hold ownership. When we're looking internationally, for practical reasons and for some other reasons, depending on the country you're looking to buy in, we require an entity to be set up to hold that property. Sometimes for the custodian, it's nice practical because we need to sign closing documents on behalf of the client, work with the title company, and that just can be tough in the international side. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it a lot easier just in general. If there's a company that owns it down there, the legal paperwork, it's a lot easier for people to give power of attorney to people locally to be able to sign things on your behalf if it's owned by a company as opposed to individually. It gets very complicated, I think.
Which would bring me to the next reason the entity is almost always needed is depending on what the country you're purchasing in, they may not recognize the U.S. retirement account. They may want a local entity set up by that country to own the property. So if we rewind to the client who retires at the account here, if they want to purchase in Panama, they could set up a U.S. LLC, a Panamanian entity, an international business company, however they want to set that up. The IRA account can be 100% owner of that entity. It could be up 50% owner, 10% owner. That structuring doesn't matter. They can fund the entity and then purchase the property. If it's, for a simple answer, just a rental property, it operates through that entity. So rental income gets deposited into that entity. If it needs a repair or an expense, the entity can pay that from like an operating bank account. We don't have to be involved at that point. The investment can just operate on its own. Depending on the situation, it can get a little complicated, like I mentioned, if you're splitting ownership or whatnot. But really, on the U.S. side, it's still a retirement account investment. Right. The retirement account owns part of that entity. The only time you have to transfer funds back to the retirement account is if you want to transfer it to a different retirement account or start taking income personally, because then our job is to do the proper tax reporting or for the distributions of the retirement account. So if it's traditional IRA, you pay taxes on just what you pull out. If it's a Roth IRA, tax-free on those withdrawals, but we do that reporting. As long as the funds stay in the retirement account, just retirement account basis, as long as the funds stay in the retirement account, there's no tax implication then. So you sold that property, made a really good profit. The funds can be sent back to that entity's bank account, back to the retirement account. No tax implication on the U.S. side. There could be some international, or depending on where you purchase, there might be some taxes on that side, but at least for the U.S. side, you keep that tax benefit of the retirement account.
I see. Okay. So I guess, so you have your retirement account. It's going to own the foreign property. Let's say you own it in a foreign company that owns the property. That foreign company, if it receives rental income, what if they need to pay that rental income into a foreign bank account? Can you have the foreign account owned by the retirement account, I guess? Is that what you're saying? Or how? I'm just thinking from a cash perspective, could that get complicated? The cash is going to a personal account. That's probably bad.
You'd want to set up in the name of, you wouldn't set up a personal account. You'd want to set up an international account.
But I guess
in the name of the company.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, as long if it's the company's account and the retirement account owns the company, then you're good. Okay, that makes sense.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, you just want to set it to a personal account because that could look like a distribution.
For sure. Yeah, that was my concern, but yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Okay. I know there are some, sticking with the real estate thing, I know there are some restrictions on the real estate. If you could go over a few of those, what you can't do, what's going to be a problem.
Yeah, the important thing, this is where it should be investment real estate, definitely for the time, at least it's owned in the retirement account. No personal use. The IRS does prohibit any personal use. It's not like 1031 exchange or some other things where they do allow some. Retirement account allows no personal use while it's owned the retirement account. And then self-dealing can come into place where your lineal descendants, what we call prohibited parties, can't personally benefit from that property. You couldn't rent it out to your children, grandchildren, spouse. They can't directly benefit. That also would mean you can't personally receive income that should have went to your retirement account. So it's like a dual purpose in the personal benefit.
Interesting. Yeah, you're buying a vacation property and you want to put it in this thing. It's not a typical, you're not going to be spending, it's not your vacation property. This is purely an investment vehicle that you need to rent out for third party purposes or just invest, or it's just an investment like any other asset. It's not your personal home. It's the retirement account's home.
Correct. Yeah. It's the retirement account's home. Your benefit is growing the retirement account, creating wealth for you that way. Some people, if you have some time to plan for it, you can plan for it to be your retirement home later. So you use the retirement account as an investment now, and then Once I'm retired, I can remove this from the retirement account. I can transfer ownership over. Then you can use it personally once it's out of the retirement account. But while the retirement account, even if the retirement account just owns 1% of the property, you can't use it personally.
Okay. That was going to be one of my questions was if you split the ownership, can you say use that? Okay. Regardless, 1% is in the retirement account. There's no personal use of it.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
What if there's a large expense what if you own this property and the roof blows off and you need to go spend 30 grand on the roof? Does that have to come out of the IRAs, like cash in a way? Or how do you supplement that?
So the easiest one, because we get that question quite often. We're going to say is yes, if you have the cash available in the retirement account, that's the easiest one. Have the retirement account pay that expense. Say that's not an option, we go into option 2.
Maybe, yeah.
Yep. So retirement accounts are eligible for loans. You can actually take a loan. Your retirement account can take a loan out. It has to be a non-recourse loan, no personal guarantee. You can't put your own personal collateral up. Essentially, they're lending to the retirement account, and there may or may not be. You
loan your own money to the retirement account or no?
Yeah, you can. But you can. Well, we'll get to that. So that was the very last option.
I got you.
Yeah. The second one would be if there's no institution that can lend you the money, so there's no bank or anything that'll send you the money that way, you can then try and get a personal loan from a non-prohibited party. So not a lineal family member.
Okay.
You go aunt, uncle, cousin, business partners, possibly. As long as they're not a prohibited party to the retirement account, you can borrow money from them to pay this expense and then pay them back later.
Okay.
If we've crossed all the bridges and there's just nothing here, there's a possibility to if it's going to, basically the property is going to be desolate, you're going to lose the property or whatever reason. We have had people that have just done it personally and then, paid it back that way. Basically, once you've checked every single box and there's just no, it's basically, I'm going to lose the property or, because tax bills are coming up pretty often. We're like, oh, I need to pay the tax bill. I have nothing to pay the tax bill. What can I do? Because the only thing in the crunch, sometimes people are not eligible to put more money into the retirement account in the future.
That's where I was worried because you can't just drop 30 grand into your retirement account on a given.
Yeah. So it is nice to obviously keep reserves for those expenses. But yes, if it came down to it, basically the county is going to take it back. You can do it that way.
Yeah.
It's just, we try to exhaust all the other options before we get to that point.
I see. That makes sense. In general, if you go this route, in particular, this is really very specific to real estate because if you go private equity route or with other securities and things like that, there's not ever going to be like a cash flow need unless there's, and that's separate debt maybe, I guess. But so if you go the real estate route, it probably makes sense to keep a nice cash balance in there just to avoid those issues, which I don't know. I guess that's something you could play with depending on what type of property it is and what type of expenses you're dealing with. But because the other question I get a lot, which is an interesting one, is at least with the traditional IRA, is required minimum distributions. Because you've taken the liquidity out of this thing. How do you go about that?
So I'll just review what that is for the audience as well. So at certain ages, I think it's 72 currently. It was 70 and a half. Now I think it's 72. So whenever you're listening to this, it can obviously keep moving. But you're required to start taking a percentage of the retirement account out as distributions as income. That's normally a small percentage the first couple of years, but it grows pretty quickly. It may only be, I forget the first year, but like a 1.5%, 2%, but eventually you have to keep taking money out of this retirement account. If you don't have any liquid assets, so eventually you've exhausted all the liquid assets and all you have left is the real estate in the retirement account, you can start taking in-kind distributions of the real estate to satisfy the RMD. You can technically do this at any point, but it probably makes sense to pull from easier liquid investments first, because what the in-kind distribution of the real estate, if we have an entity, essentially you're transferring ownership of the entity to yourself personally, which is in a taxable way. If you didn't own the real estate in an entity, you're redeeding part of the property to you personally. That involves getting
you too with an evaluation too, right?
Correct. Yeah. Because it's a taxable event, we do need someone to evaluate what the market value is at that time that you take that out. that's why it's always nice if you can pull from cash, liquid assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds that are easier to sell. And then the real estate's always the last option. And then, you could transfer as little as 5% of the ownership to you personally at that time. And that satisfies the RMD. No cash is actually exchanging it. So you're not getting cash sent to you. You're just exchanging a part of the property ownership to you personally.
So basically you get a valuation of the property and then you figure out what your required minimum distribution is and you find that percentage that hits that number.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. You can always do more.
At the end of the day, the whole point of this is a diversification. So it's probably not wise just to have a real estate asset solely making up your retirement account. So
correct.
In general, you probably shouldn't be getting in that situation more or less. But I've been curious as to how that's an option. If you have to make $1,000 distribution, you have to sell your $1 million property to, within the thing which at the end of the day, that's the benefit, right? Is that when you sell that $1 million property, it's not taxed. Like you can obviously, if it's a traditional IRA, when it comes out, it will. Yeah. But you get that benefit of deferral, which there's really nowhere else you get that in the tax code for that type of asset.
Yeah. And your example is if it was $1 million profit and you only had to pull out $1,000, you only get taxed on $1,000. You made a huge profit on this property, but you only get taxed what you pull out. And you have flexibility then on how you want to pull the funds out. So those are really the benefits, is just kind of tax flexibility. And you point about the distribution. If you live long enough, then that might become an issue. Even if you planned a very diverse portfolio, if you live long enough, that's a possibility for anybody. That might be the last asset that stays in a retirement account.
Yeah, and I could see it being more of a problem for sure with like inherited IRAs. If you inherit an IRA that has a real estate asset in it, the way I understand the new rules, and again, they've been moving around a lot, but that inherited beneficiary has to distribute that within 10 years. I think there's a different rule for it's a spousal inheritance. But if I inherited my father's IRA and had real estate in it, I would have 10 years to pull all that out. Or you could do it in the initial year, but that could you're probably going to have to generate some cash. or I guess in that case, you could just pull the asset, then kind distribution. But it's going to be expensive.
Yeah. So to answer your question, the spouses, you do have the option as a spouse to take over it as your own. So normally in the unfortunate event your spouse passes away, the custodian should give you an option. Do you want this as an inherited IRA or do you want to take it as your own retirement account? I won't advise on what you should do, but if you do the inherited route, you're right. It's 10 years right now is the current rule that sometime in the next 10 years, all the assets have to be out of that retirement account. If you take it as your own, it's only subject to your own RMDs, exactly.
Yeah.
But you're right. If it's anyone other than your spouse, essentially you have 10 years from when you inherit that account to get all the assets out. So you have 10 years to try and play how much should I take out, whether I do straight 10%, do I wait till year 10? If the valuation might drop 1 year, it might make sense. So it's hard to say what to do in that 10 years, but you're right. It takes planning to make sure you do it the most tax efficient way.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. On your side, is generally what you're doing, people are coming to you with assets that they have, whether it's like a private equity investment that they're interested in making, and then they're asking, and you're helping them structure that into a retirement vehicle, essentially. Or are you helping people find investments as well? Or how does that?
Yeah. So we're not a direct custodian. We're not financial buyers. So we actually can't direct them on what to do. I would say 90+% of the clients come to us, they already have their investment in mind, whether they just know generally what they want to invest in, or they actually know exactly what they want to invest in. And then we facilitate from there. We say, okay, this is how you should do it. If the structuring is a little wrong, we say, hey, to satisfy, keep your IRA in good standing, this is how you should do it.
I work together with their financial advisor to figure out, for example, if, building you want to get some real estate. If somebody has $1 million in a 401k, maybe you could buy a property here, some gold, building a diversified alternative investment IRA. I think that's probably the goal for an investor. Yeah.
Yep. Correct. Yeah. We're just the custodian, the operator, but they actually pick your own investment. That's where the self-directed term comes from. It's really a marketing term. It's not really any different, but you can take your own investments and we don't get to tell you what to do. at that point. As long as it's within federal guidelines, we'll help you out how to do it. And and then obviously people have always had interest if they have a private equity fund as an example, they want to invest in, they've mentioned IRAs. There's pretty easy way that we can get them in something like that. That's pretty simple. Okay. The real estate always just comes down to, okay, what's the plan for this? If it's a buy and hold rental property, is it a fix and flip? What are the plans for it? We have those conversations just to make sure it's done correctly.
Yeah. And one thing I'll point out that sometimes gets overlooked is you have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the cash and assets need to be, it needs to be purchased by the retirement plan. So it's not like you could have a brokerage account with $1 million in it and you want to do the strategy. You can't go buy a property and put it in a retirement plan. The retirement plan, you have to have a funded retirement plan that's capable of purchasing the alternative investment you're at.
Correct. Yeah. After you've purchased an asset personally, you can't have it after the fact put into a retirement account. You would set the retirement account for real estate purchase. That's when we'll work with the title company, make sure that on the deed, it lists the retirement account ahead of time because you can't after the fact put it in. So you would want to move those funds over from the brokerage account to purchase the asset. So it always helps to get the account set up beforehand if you think in the event you're going to purchase this.
But can you just let's say you want to purchase a property or any investment for $200,000. You can't just get that cash into the retirement account to purchase it because there's going to be contribution limitation.
Correct. Most people fund accounts with us from already existing retirement accounts. So you can make contributions, but like you said, there's limits there.
Right. Generally, you're going to roll like your original example, rolling an employer 401k into a self-directed IRA. You got your cash. The rollover's fine. But I think that trips some people up is not having the cash available in the first place in the retirement account to make these. Usually we're talking about people that are nearer to retirement, probably. I don't know, depending on, I guess it just depends.
Yeah, just
especially people with the self-employment type plans where you can contribute more on the front end. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Some asset classes have lower minimums, so we'll still make contributions depending on what they're trying to get into. But generally, if you're buying real estate, you've probably had an IRA or a 401k that you're looking to use.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess if you're just starting out, especially if you're self-employed, that could be a strategy too, is let's start maxing out your solo 401k or SEP. Let's start maxing that out for 4 or 5 years. And you're going to have a good chunk of money that you could then invest in different things. Yeah. So, very cool. Well, hey, this is extremely helpful. I'll ask one more question. When you see people that come into this route, whether it's for real estate investments or any type of alternative investment, is there any particular thing that you see traps that people fall into or common questions? Just a general advice that you have for anybody getting started, I guess?
Especially in real estate, it really helps to have a plan ahead of time. So many times we do have people who are like, I'm buying this land. And you're like, okay, you plan on developing the land. Is this going to be, just hold it? Like having a plan and knowing an exit, probably having a backup exit plan too. Because we mentioned, if you're planning, we're going to live in this one day, that's going to plan on when do we take distributions and so on, just knowing it. It's real estate specific, but like I said, real estate's one where it does help to have kind of the details flushed out at least a little bit on how we're going to purchase it, what our long-term plans are. Those plans can change, but it just helps to know that ahead of time. Because the IRA does have its rules, you don't want to buy something and then have to change your plan and maybe without the confines. The other asset classes I mentioned are pretty simple. They're really easy. Real estate's the one where it just takes having a good conversation and kind of knowing what we plan to do ahead of time.
Yeah, what the goals are. All right. Yep. Sounds good. Well, thanks a lot, Matt. Where can people get in touch with you if they have questions and want to set one of these things up?
Yeah, I'll provide all contact information, email, phone number is all be available. But I'll throw my direct phone number anyways right now, but it's 239-333-4461. I'll provide my email and you can set it on my calendar. We can talk about it, different investment plans you have.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'll put your stuff in the show notes so that people know how to get in touch with you. And yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Matt. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Yeah.